7. School. Good idea? Bad idea? Let's see. He brought them a low type of egg cup full of hot water and a corner of soap cut off a big cake to wash with. They stood on each side of the bowl. Little Bear stripped off his bandolier, which left him naked to the waist. Then he lost no time in plunging his arms in and beginning energetically to rub the whole of the top part of his body with his wet hands, throwing water everywhere. He made a lot of noise about it and seemed to be enjoying himself, although he ignored the soap. Would he have ever seen soap before? Probably not. Boone was a different matter. Omri had already noticed that Boone was none too fussy about being clean, and in fact, didn't look like he'd washed or shaved for weeks. Now he approached the hot water gingerly, eyeing Omri as if to see how little washing he could actually get away with. "Come on, Boone, off with that shirt. You cannot wash your neck with your shirt on," said Omri briskly, echoing his mother, sounding like his mom. With extreme reluctance, shivering theatrically, Boone dragged off his plaid shirt and kept his hat on. "I think you should wash your hair, too," said Omri. Boone stared at him. "Wash my hair?" he said incredulously. "Washing hair's for women, 'tain't for men." But he did consent to rub his hands lightly over the piece of soap, although grimacing hideously, as if it were some slimy dead thing, and wash at least the palms of his hands. Then he rinsed them hastily, smeared some water on his face, and reached for his shirt without even drying himself. "Boone," said Omri sternly, "just look at Little Bear. You called him dirty, but at least he's washing himself thoroughly. Now you just do something about your neck and, well, under your arms." Boone's look was now one of stark horror. "Under my arms? And your chest, I should think. I'm not taking you to school all sweaty." "Heck, don't you go running down sweat. It's sweat that keeps a man clean." Ew, that's not true, is it? After a lot of bullying, Omri managed to get him to wash at least a few more bits of himself. "You have to wash your clothes sometime, too." This was too much for Boone. "Ain't nobody gonna touch my duds, and that's final," he said. They ain't been washed since I bought 'em. Water takes all the stuffing out of good cloth. Without all the dust and sweat, they don't keep you warm no more." So he's never washed his clothes since he had them. Ugh. At last they were ready, and Omri pocketed them and ran down to breakfast. He felt tense with excitement. He'd never carried them around the house before. It was risky, but not so risky as taking them to school. He felt that having family breakfast with them secretly in his pocket was like a training for school. Breakfast in his house was often a dicey meal anyway, with everyone more or less in a bad mood in the morning. Today, for instance, Adiel had lost his football shorts and was blaming everybody in turn, and their mother had just discovered that Gillen, contrary to his assurances the night before when he said that he was done with his homework and wanted to watch television, had not done it. And their father was grumpy because he wanted to do some gardening and it was raining yet again. "I know I put them in the laundry basket," Adiel was saying fretfully. "Well, if you did, I washed them, in which case they're back in your top drawer," said his mother. "But you didn't, 'cause I didn't, and they're not. Now listen to me, Gillen. It's only a bit of history, one mini tiny castle to draw, and a tiny paragraph to write," said Gillen. "I can do it at school." "Stinking climate," muttered their father. "Those onion sets will rot if I don't get them in soon." "Gillen, did you borrow them?" "I got my own." So right now, all his family's arguing about different things at breakfast. Omri ate his cereal in silence, grinning to himself, hugging his secret. He couldn't believe they were in his pocket right now while he's eating breakfast. He slipped a couple of cornflakes into his pockets. "I bet Omri took them," said Adiel suddenly. Omri looked up. "Took what?" "My shorts." "What on earth would I want your shorts for?" "It might be your idea of a joke to hide them," Adiel retorted. This was not as outrageous as it sounds. It had, until very recently, become a common form of revenge when Adiel or Gillen had been specially unbearable for Omri to sneak some valuable possession and hide it. But now, however, Omri felt very far away from such babyishness and was quite insulted. "Don't be stupid," he said. "So you did," said Adiel in triumph. "I did not." "You're red in the face. That's proof you're guilty." "I swear," said Omri. "They're probably under your bed," said their mother to Adiel. "Go and have a look." "I have looked. I've looked everywhere." "Oh my gosh, now it's starting to hail," said their father despairingly. "So much for the apple blossom." Under cover of the moans that went up about the prospect of no apples in the autumn, and the exclamations about the size of the hailstones, Omri slipped his coat on and ran through the bouncing ice lumps to school. So it's hailing on his way to school. On the way, he stopped under a protecting yew tree and took the little men out, and he showed them each what a hailstone looks like, which to them was about the size of a football. Now, when we get to school, said Omri, you must lie very still and quiet in my pockets. I'm putting you in separate ones because I cannot risk any fighting or quarreling. If you're seen, I don't know what would happen. Danger? Said Little Bear, his eyes glinting. Yes, but not of death so much. You might be taken away from me, and then you'll never get back to your own time. You mean we'd never wake up out of this here drunken dream? Said Boone. If that's how you look at it, no. But Little Bear was staring at him very thoughtfully. Own time, he said musingly. Very strange magic. Omri had never arrived at school with more apprehension in his heart, not even on spelling test days, and yet he was excited too. Once, he had taken a white mouse to school in his blazer pocket, and he'd planned to do all sorts of fiendish things with it, like he wanted to put it in his teacher's trouser leg, he'd had a man teacher then, or put it down the back of a girl's neck, or just put it on the floor and let it run around and throw the whole class into chaos. He actually hadn't dared do anything with it except let it peep out and make his neighbors giggle. This time he had no such plans. All he was hoping was that they could get through the day without anybody finding out. Patrick was waiting for him at the school gate. Have you got them? Yeah. His eyes lit up. Give, I want him. All right, said Omri, but you have to promise that you won't show him to anybody. Omri reached into his right-hand pocket and closed his fingers gently around Boone and passed him into Patrick's hand. The moment Omri had let go of him, things started to happen. A particularly nasty little girl called April, who had been right across the playground at the moment of the transaction, was at Patrick's side about 2 seconds later. What have you got there? What did he give you? She asked in a raucous voice like a crow. Patrick's face flushed red. Nothing. Push off, he said. At once, April pointed her witchy finger at him. Look at Patrick blushing. Look at Patrick blushing, she squawked. And several other children speedily arrived at the scene, as a certain type of child will whenever somebody's getting taunted, and soon Patrick and Omri found themselves surrounded by kids. Now, they're trying to stay incognito, right? They're trying to stay where no one will notice them, and now look at this. Everybody's staring at them and pointing. What's he got? I bet it's something horrid. Bet it's a slimy toad. A little wriggly worm more like it. A beetle. Like him. Omri felt his blood beginning to get hot in his head. He longed to bash them all one by one, or better still, all at once, a giant knocking down hordes of enemies like skittles. He imagined them all rolling backwards down a long, wide flight of steps, in waves, bowled over by his flashed fist and flying feet. The best he could really manage in reality, though, was to lower his head, keep his hands cupped stiffly over his left pocket, and barge through the chanting circle. He caught one of them a good butt in the stomach, which was rather satisfying. Patrick was hot on his heels, and they belted across the playground and in through the double doors, which fortunately had just opened. Once inside, they were relatively safe. There were teachers all over the place, and any kind of fighting or taunting, above a sly pinch or a snide whisper, was out. Patrick and Omri slowed to a walk, went to their places, and sat down trying to look perfectly calm and ordinary, so as not to attract their teacher's attention. Their breathing gave them away, though. Well, you two, what are you puffing about? Been running? They glanced at each other and nodded. So long as you've not been fighting, she said, giving them a sharp look. She always behaved as if a little fight was a long step along the road to H-E double. Neither of the boys got much work done during the morning, and they couldn't concentrate, and each of them was too aware of the passenger in his pocket. Both Little Bear and Boone were restless, particularly Little Bear. Boone was naturally lazier. He kept dozing off in the dark and kept waking up with a little jump that made Patrick very nervous. But Little Bear, he was scrambling about in the pocket about the whole time. It was during the third period, when they were all in the main hall listening to the headmaster, the principal, whose name was Mr. Johnson, announcing plans for the end-of-year show, that Little Bear got really sick and tired of being imprisoned, and he started to take drastic action. So remember, he's in his pocket, and he's just sick of being in there. The first thing Omri knew was that there was a sharp prick to his hip, like an insect had stung him. And for a moment, he was silly enough to almost think it was an ant or a wasp and slap it, but he barely stopped himself from doing that. Then there came another jab, sharper than the first, sharp enough, in fact, to make Omri let out a sharp yelp. Yep! Who did that? Said Mr. Johnson, irritably. Remember, the principal is talking. Omri didn't answer, but the girls sitting next to him started giggling and staring. Was that you, Omri? Yeah, I'm sorry, something stuck into me. Patrick? Did you stick a pencil into Omri? Such a thing was not unknown during assemblies when they were bored. No, Mr. Johnson. Well, be quiet when I'm talking. Another jab, and this time Little Bear meant business, and he kept his knife sticking in to Omri's hip. And Omri shouted, "Ouch!" and jumped to his feet. "Omri, Patrick, leave the hall," said Mr. Johnson. "But I didn't," began Patrick. "Out, I said," shouted Mr. Johnson furiously. They left, and Patrick walked normally, but Omri was dancing about, shouting, "Ow, ow, ow," as he walked out of the gym, at every step, as Little Bear continued to dig the needle point of the knife in. The whole school was in hysterics of laughter, and Mr. Johnson was frothing with rage. By the time they reached the swing doors, and they departed out on the playground. Outside they ran, while Patrick ran, and Omri sort of performed a series of sideways leaps to the far end of the playground. And on the way, Omri plunged his hand into his pocket, seized Little Bear, and dragged him out, and the agony stopped. And safe in a sheltered corner behind some privet bushes, Omri held his persecutor up at eye level, shook him violently, the way you shake a bottle of medicine. He called him the worst names he could possibly think of, and when he'd run out of swear words, which was not for some time, he hissed like Mr. Johnson, "What do you mean by it? How dare you? How dare you stick your knife into me?" Little Bear dare. Omri keep in dark many hours. Little Bear want to see school place, not lie in hot dark. No breathe, no see. Want enjoy. I warned you you wouldn't. It's not my fault you made me bring you. Now you got me in trouble. Little Bear looked mulish, but he stopped shouting. Seeing this evidence that a truce was on its way, Omri calmed down a little bit too. Listen, I can't let you see because I can't take you out. You have no idea what would happen if I did. If any of the other children saw you, they would want to grab you and mess about with you. You would hate it, and it would be terribly dangerous too. You'd probably get hurt or killed. You've got to lie quiet till school's over. I'm sorry if you're bored, but it's your own fault. Little Bear thought this over, and then he said the most astonishing thing. Want Boone. What? Your enemy? Better enemy than alone in dark. Patrick had taken Boone out of his pocket, and the little cowboy was sitting in his hand, and they were gazing at each other, and Omri said, "Boone, Little Bear says he wants you. He's lonely and he's bored." "Well, ain't that just too bad," said Boone sarcastically. "After he tried to kill me, now he's coming over all lovey-dovey. Listen, you redskin," he shouted through cupped hands across a yawning gulf between Patrick and Omri. "I don't care how lonesome you are, and I don't care if you drop down dead. The only good engine's a dead engine. Do you hear me?" Little Bear turned his head haughtily away. "I think he's lonely too, really," said Patrick in a whisper. "He's been crying." "Oh, no, not again," said Omri. "Honestly, Boone, at your age." Just then they heard the teacher calling them from the school door. "Come on in, you two. You've not got the day off, you know." "Give me your knife," said Omri to Little Bear on a sudden impulse, "and then I'll put you together." With only a moment's hesitation, Little Bear handed over the knife. Omri slipped it into the small breast pocket of his shirt, which was empty and where it wouldn't get easily lost. And then he said to Patrick, "Let me have Boone." "No, just for the next lesson, and then at lunchtime you can have both of them. They'll keep each other company. They can't do each other much damage in a pocket." So reluctantly, Patrick handed Boone over, and Omri held them one in each hand as they were face to face. "Be good, you two. Try talking to each other instead of fighting, but whatever you do, don't you make any noise." And he slipped them both into his left-hand pocket, and he and Patrick ran back to the school building.